Good evening. My name is Dave Birchenough, and I have the privilege of being the president of the board of directors of the Land Trust. Well, never would I have imagined a year ago at our first Zoom annual meeting that we'd be doing it again in 2021. But here we are, and it's wonderful for all of you to attend. Let's hope that next year we can go back the way we used to do it, party mode and in person. So despite the pandemic challenges, the Land Trust is really doing pretty well this year, and you'll hear a bit about that later in Andy's report. Acreage protected, membership, trail usage are all up substantially, and our intrepid volunteers are so happy to be back out on the trail assisting with trail work. Right, Jason? Our Go Finger Lakes website, perhaps the most user-friendly resource for information on outdoor exploring in our region, has exploded to 14,000 e-news subscribers. So I'll bet quite a few of you are part of that. And if you're not, and you're looking for something to do, it's a great resource. So as committed as the board is, and as dedicated as our 16 staff members are, it is you, our membership, that enables us in our mission of conserving forever the lands and waters of the Finger Lakes region. Thanks to you, conserved land and healthy lakes will be our legacy in a special region to be enjoyed by anyone who lives in or visits the Finger Lakes. So welcome, and we're going to get this started. We're going to turn this over to Bill Eggers, who's chair of the Finance Committee, to enlighten you a little bit as to our financial progress. Bill?
Thanks, Dave. And I'll keep this brief, but cover three topics. First, our fiscal year performance. Our fiscal year ends on June 30, and I'll talk about our performance versus the budget. We have two endowments, and I'll give you that pretty briefly. And then I'll talk just very briefly about our budget for this coming year, starting July 1. Our revenue for this year is in the neighborhood of 1.58 million. That is better than last year and ahead of budget. We were helped by a grant from the Paycheck Protection Program of $187,000, which allowed our staff to be fully employed last summer during difficult times. Our membership contributions and donations are up, as are our membership numbers, and thank you to all the members for that. It is the lifeblood of the organization. And the staff and our development committee of the board have worked hard at making that possible. The operating expenses have been controlled, and they are lower than budget. Will come in the neighborhood of $1.52 million. That's under budget. And we had some additions to our expense budget with a full-time land steward added during the course of the year and a contract bookkeeper. The staff worked remotely, and we made that possible by an addition to the budget of approximately $11,000 for the IT line, essentially 5 new laptops, so our staff could work remotely. Turning to our endowments, the first of these and the largest is our stewardship fund, which allows for the care of our preserves in perpetuity through a 4% draw from this fund. That fund is in the range of $7.9 million. It includes a major part of a $500,000 donation that we received back in the fourth quarter of the calendar quarter, and 22% growth in our investments. Our legal defense fund, which allows for the defense of our conservation easements and preserves, is $356,000, also up as a result of a $10,000 donation and similar growth in our investments. Now, turning to the budget for the coming year, that will be approximately $1.65 million. It represents a return to normal. Both of our last two operating years were constrained in certain respects by the pandemic, And in particular, travel events and programs were down both of those years. So this coming year will be a return to a normal range of budget, up about 2.5% from the budget that we had entering this last year. We have provided for a COLA for staff, cost of living adjustment of 3%, which they have fully earned, and our board is very pleased to put that into the budget going forward. The results that I've reported are thanks to our generous members. You are the lifeblood of the organization, as I said, and continue to support our mission. So thanks for that. And with that, Dave, that concludes my financial report.
Great. Thank you very much, Bill. So our next order of business is to vote on the slate of board members. We have both new ones, and we have a term is 3 years, and you're allowed to be on for 3 successive terms. So a couple of the people are going to be on their second or third term, and I will now name them. It's Beth Dan coming on from Corning, coming on for her first term. Bill Eggers from South Bristol, coming on for his third term. Maria Fernandez Gage from Mecklenburg, voting in for her first term. Hadley Lundback from Rochester, her second term. Wade Sarkis from Canandaigua, first term. Jan Sawinski coming back to the board from Ithaca, first term. And Jim Walsh from Spafford, first term. Now you must remember, you must be a member to vote. And if you are a member and have not already voted by mail or online, you can go to the chat room and vote now. Do I have that, Kelly?
Yep, the chat room is up. You can see it if you kind of hover over the bottom of your screen, if you're not familiar with where the chat function is, and then you can just.
I can't wait till next year we can do it with a show of hands again.
Or yeah, I know. 3 pages though, so I'd have to zoom. Thank you for voting. It looks like we're getting some positive endorsements of the board slate.
Well, it's a good one.
Excellent. All right. It seems that the membership approves.
All righty, thank you. Should we wait a little longer, or do we say it's good?
I think we're okay. We also received, quite a few online votes and also some paper ballots mailed in from the newsletter. So I think we're okay.
Well, good. Thank you all for taking the time to vote. It's part of the process. So it looks from everything that I've seen that this slate of board members passes. It's accepted by everybody. Thank you, membership. All right, next order of business, I want to introduce to you Jason Gorman, who's up there and on my screen at the top right, and he is preserve manager, and he is going to announce the Volunteer of the Year award.
Thanks, Dave, and hello to everyone out there. I too cannot wait to conduct this in person next year, but I'm happy to do a shameless plug and say that I have started doing volunteer work days. So if anyone's interested, please email me and we'll do some work together. But as Dave mentioned, my name's Jason. I'm the Nature Preserve Manager for the Land Trust. Over the years in this organization, my role has allowed me the opportunity to work with many great volunteers. With nearly 50 preserves spread across the Finger Lakes, it's very important to have nature preserve stewards assist us with the preserve management. The recipients of this year's Volunteer of the Year award goes to a lovely couple from Candor, whom I've known from a previous life at a job I had before this one. And I know that they have a wonderful taste in music and are excellent gardeners, and love sharing tips with them. But this year, this award goes to the stewards of the Logan Hill Nature Preserve, and that is Mary and Robert Hanno. The Hannos have helped steward this nearly 350-acre preserve since it opened in 2015. If you were to ask Mary what they do up there, she'll tell you they don't do anything except move a few sticks off the trail. Well, that's not true. I mean, it is true, but they do way more than just that. The Hannos frequently visit the preserve from their home in the village of Candor, and they've helped with many, many different things over the years, including trimming trails, especially multiflora rows and the many invasive species up there. They've cleaned up trash that was illegally dumped, and you won't believe some of the stuff that they have cleaned up and what gets dumped up there. And yes, they have moved sticks off the trail. One of the more impressive things that the Hannos have done up there is what Betsy Darlington and I refer to as Mary's Ditch. Logan, for anyone who's been up Logan Hill Road, you will know that it is a seasonal, minimally maintained public road that gets washed out very easily. Well, on the lower stretch of the road, Mary hand dug a ditch on one side of the road to help divert water off the road and from crossing over and eroding it even further. And it's very, very rocky, and it's an impressive feat that she has done up there. Another thing that's very important about their stewardship is that they are community members and live nearby to the preserve and can walk out their front door and hike around the preserve right in their backyard, essentially. This is important because they can be our eyes and ears on the preserve. So Mary and Robert, this preserve I award to you as a recognition of all that you've done since 2015. Thank you so much for your efforts and for being such wonderful people. And if everyone in attendance will please join me in virtual applause as we recognize the Hannos from Candor as this year's Volunteers of the Year. Thank you very much. I can't wait to see you in person.
Nicely done, Jason, and thank you, the Hannos. Great. It's always fun to be able to do that. So next, we're going to hear from Andy Zepp, our Executive Director, and he'll bring you up to date on all our conservation efforts across the region. Andy, take it away.
Great. Well, thanks, Dave, and thanks everyone for joining us. And I first want to thank you all because despite everything that COVID threw at us, we made great progress this year. We protected more than 2,000 acres. We opened 2 new preserves to the public at a time where we had record use, which was a really good thing, but also created some added demands. We, as part of our restoration efforts, planted more than 1,800 native trees and shrubs. And also, thanks to an anonymous donor, to connect inner city youth from Rochester with nature, we awarded, first ever for us, we awarded $50,000 in small grants to other nonprofits to help people who didn't have the opportunity to enjoy these places to connect with nature. And I love this photo, which was taken by a volunteer, Bill Hecht, of a meadow mowed by a volunteer, John Smith, that is just a great example of what the Land Trust can do and why there is some hope in all of the grim environmental news we hear. For those who've never been, this is one of my favorite spots. This is the Lindsay Parsons Biodiversity Preserve in West Danby. It has been assembled by 13 different land transactions. So thanks to those of you who've been members a long time, you've supported every step of the way the protection of pretty much an entire valley. And this preserve is incredibly diverse, everything from river otters to all kinds of birds. And the meadows you see has been a passion of our volunteer, John Smith, who thanks to his efforts, not only is it a beautiful, stunning landscape, we're seeing the return of bobolinks, which are a species of conservation concern that really requires that management. And this is just, the combination of a dedicated staff, great volunteers, and your financial support allowed us to continue, which was a challenging year. And I'm just going to do a quick tour of the region and some of the highlights. And if you have questions, put them in the chat because we're going to take time to answer whatever questions you have. We have far more going on than you can see here. So I'm just going to provide an overview. And this is a case, you're looking at Skaneateles Lake from the Western Shore. And this is a project, some projects take decades, they take generations. Their properties, discussions still underway that probably started with Betsy Darlington in year 1 of the land trust. And here we are 30 years later, still working. But then there are others like this one that come up quickly. We learned that a 70-acre parcel of steep wooded hillside that was highly erodible was potentially going to tax auction. And by moving very quickly in the span of several days and involving a special board meeting, and with the support of Cayuga County, we stepped in and secured this land that, again, really should just be set aside and left to grow old. Even just logging the site, it would be hard to imagine doing so without a significant erosion impact on the lake. And the parcel I mentioned that you just saw is to the left of the lake, in the middle of the lake. So what it highlights too is this is in a focus area where we are not just working with 1 or 2 landowners, but many landowners using every tool in the toolbox. Where that was an acquisition, but the orange you see are existing conservation easements. Yellow is projects that are in process that include both easements and acquisitions. This map is a little dated, and I'm pleased to report that the yellow between the Hinchcliffe and High Vista preserves on the east side is now green. And we're now building a mile-long connecting trail between those preserves. In addition, just to the right of that yellow parcel, we are now under contract for another yellow parcel. So we're making good progress in this area. And for anyone who's familiar with the Skaneateles real estate market, waiting is not a good idea. We're seeing tremendous pressure, not just in Skaneateles, Canandaigua, Ithaca, other areas where we have to move quickly if we're not just going to conserve parcels of land, but intact networks. At the lower end of Bear Swamp State Forest, you see a yellow rectangle. And that was another project we completed at one of the most significant wetlands in the region and perhaps the state. This is Bear Swamp, a unique ecological area. It has rare flora in wetland fens. It's significant for birds. It's part of an Audubon designated bird area. And it plays a very important role in filtering runoff to the lake. So we acquired 100 acres there and will be conveying that to New York State as an addition to the state forest at some point in the future. Just south of the watershed, we also partnered with New York State's Department of Agriculture and Markets and the Birdsall family to protect this very scenic farm, more than 300 acres bordering State Route 41 for almost a mile of road frontage. And this is the second easement project we've done with the Birdsalls. The first was further north, actually in the Skaneateles Lake watershed. Hopping over a bit west to Owasco, we completed our 5th acquisition in the area south of the lake known as the Owasco Flats. This is in about an 800-acre area that includes wetlands as well as former wetlands that were drained for agriculture. And this year we bought one of those parcels that was drained for agriculture, but in wet years really wasn't productive. And we were able, it really wasn't a good fit with agriculture, so we bought it. We're now partnering with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to restore wetlands on the site. And in the future, we will add that to the state's Owasco Flats Wildlife Management Area. For those of you who've never done it, I highly recommend paddling the Owasco Inlet. It's kind of a bayou-like wooded wetland. And this year, some years there are a lot of snags, so it's hard to go far. But this year they cleared the snags, and you can kayak or canoe for several miles up the creek. And if you don't have a kayak or canoe, there's a marina you can rent from right at the site. Further south in the Owasco watershed, this is the Owasco Inlet, bordering a property that was donated to the land trust by the estate of the Sutphin family. And they gave that with the understanding that we would sell the land subject to a conservation easement that would protect the Owasco Inlet and other features while allowing a single family home on this 90-acre property. So by doing that, they were able to conserve the important watershed aspects, allow for continued agriculture, and also provide us with revenue to work in other areas. A little bit further south, we worked with the Brotherton family in Dryden to protect the Prince Farm, which is more than 300 acres on State Route 13, an area where this is a welcome open space in what's an increasingly cluttered landscape. It not only protects productive agricultural land, but also a significant wetland that helps filter runoff to Fall Creek and Cayuga Lake. A little bit further south, we've been doing a lot of work in the 6 Mile Creek watershed. And this is an area that the Land Trust started working in at the year of its founding. So part of what is important in our work is that we keep at it. Again, if a landowner is not interested, we try to maintain contact and wait for that moment, whether it's that landowner or their heirs, when we're able to meet their goals and provide for conservation. We completed 3 different conservation easements in the watershed this year. 1 was donated and 2 were purchased with support that included funding from the city of Ithaca with their watershed protection fund, Tompkins County, which also supported the Prince Farm easement, and the Prince Farm easement also had support from town of Dryden, I should mention. So we're really appreciative of municipal support. And in this case, New York State has a source water protection program through the Department of Environmental Conservation. And that's been a key funder for this and other projects, where what you're looking at is a portion of the Lounsbury Farm that includes 5,000 feet of frontage on the creek. And for those of you who've ever been to the charming hamlet of Brooktondale, just east of Ithaca, this is essentially the backdrop to Brooktondale. So very important for water quality, includes a restoration component where we're expanding vegetated buffers to the creek in partnership with the Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation District. And then also, though, we're protecting a multi-generational family farm. So that it was driven by water quality, but also, if for those of you in the Ithaca area, just drive Lounsbury Road through the Lounsbury Farm, and you'll see what is being conserved here. It's a charming, beautiful family farm and a healthy stream corridor. Just south of Brooktondale, our Emerald Necklace Greenbelt project continues. We are delighted to receive a gift from the Eberhard family of a 145-acre preserve on Eastman Hill. This is the road below, for anyone who knows this area, is Coddington Road. And we acquired 145 acres on the left side of this photo, and that will be retained as a land trust preserve. This gives you a little bit of context. This is one of the gaps in our necklace that we've been trying to fill. And as part of an ongoing effort, what you see in the kind of green or aqua colored is actually 3 different properties we purchased to add to Danby State Forest. The Eberhard properties in green. And then we also provided some guidance to the Finger Lakes Trail Conference in a really neat project where they purchased that purple property, which included a house, and they divided off the house and sold it, and then conveyed this property to the Shindagan Hollow State Forest. So you can see we're getting close to ensuring a continuous green belt that is really important for wildlife and also important for people like me who like to hike in these areas and not end up on the side of the road or in someone's backyard. So a lot of progress in the Emerald Necklace. Moving west, very similar sustained effort at the south end of Canandaigua Lake, where we've been working for years. We acquired 20 more acres at Bear Hill, this iconic promontory on the east side of the lake. And I can tell you that we also secured a contract to purchase 28 more. So puzzle piece by puzzle piece, we're adding to an existing state unique area. And we have already conserved a corridor from the shore of the lake at our East Shore Preserve to the summit of Bear Hill. And that work is continuing. We're making good progress there as well. We continue our farmland protection efforts in Canandaigua, where the town of Canandaigua is right on the frontier of Rochester suburban development. And we have partnered with the town and New York's Department of Ag and Markets to now protect 5 different farms. And this is the Stryker Farm, where we protected more than 600 acres just off State Route 3032, and are now working to protect additional farmland that is leased by the strikers. So many farmers in our region own farmland, but also for their business rely on leasing land from others. So as those lands are converted to development, their viability as a farm's at risk. So we're now working with the town and others to protect additional farmland, because in that area, in the absence of securing this, it's highly likely it will go to development. And it will raise, unless we're able to secure a sufficient land base, call into question whether those farms will be economically viable in the future. Back at the south end of the lake, we added 88 acres to the High Tor Wildlife Management Area. That includes much of this photo, both the wetlands along the West River. Conklin Gully is in the foreground of the photo. And we are also under contract to secure a key parcel, and kind of toward the back of this photo is where Clark's Gully is located. And we're under contract to acquire the actual mouth of the gully, which is traditionally been an access point for a lot of people. It's a very popular hike. And we have worked with our partners at the Canandaigua Lake Watershed Association, local municipalities, the state. And just this past Thursday, we were out with representatives of the Seneca Nation and exploring partnership opportunities with them, because this landscape is believed by many to be part of their creation story or their origin story. So we're delighted to be working now with the Seneca, and also reaching out to the Haudenosaunee of exploring how we can work together elsewhere across the region. And this is what these efforts look like on a map, where these different colors are all conserved lands. They include the scenic overlook in South Bristol and the adjacent Corolla Bar Park, which we helped create and hold a conservation easement. It includes lands we've added to state wildlife areas, our West River and Great Hill preserves. And this effort continues again to try to secure these landscapes that are recognized for their value for wildlife, recreation, watershed, and many other reasons. Now, this past year, we had record attendance at our preserves, as did state parks and as did other conservation lands. And we were very happy to be able to help provide 2 new nature preserves to the public to go visit, that people could get out. One of these is near Branchport in the Keuka Lake watershed. Our Big Gully Preserve, which is actually called the Botsford Preserve, in recognition of the donors. This is a modest piece at the mouth of a very large gully, 3 miles long. It's a remarkable natural area. We're delighted to have our first preserve in this area. If you get a chance, it's a beautiful gorge, and it's one we hope to add to in the future. And on Owasco Lake, we opened our Owasco Bluffs Preserve, which features 1,100 feet of shoreline, meadows with nesting bobolinks, some mature forest. And we realized that in the vicinity of Auburn, as with communities like Geneva, because they're surrounded by farm country and they're pretty good sized communities with a lot of kind of suburban areas, there really aren't a lot of areas to get out in nature. And sure enough, we had a tremendous response. A lot of people have been visiting the preserve, providing positive feedback. And in opening that, it wasn't just a basic trail. We got into providing for interpretation of the site, letting people know where they are and some of the special features. If you've been to our preserves, you'll recognize us elsewhere, but our stewardship team works with volunteers and contractors to provide for kiosks like this. Making sure the trail is safe and passable. So here's an example of a bridge that was built there. And as I mentioned, that work continues, and we will be inviting you all soon to an opening of our new trail connecting the Hinchcliffe and High Vista preserves east of Skaneateles Lake. This is a staff field day we had recently, helping to develop the trail. And we're not stopping there. For those of you familiar with Skaneateles, we've created a trail heading eastward from the Hinchcliffe Preserve to the summit of Ripley Hill, the highest point in the watershed. This trail will extend it to the south into Cortland County. And we're exploring with partners how to get that trail through the valley and over and up the hill to Bear Swamp, and to create a kind of a world-class network of connecting these natural areas and into an integrated system. And of course, that depends on the timing and disposition of a few key landowners, but I'm really optimistic that this will all come together. Now, at the Owasco Bluffs, this is our own Jason Gorman. It's not someone from a bank holdup, but a COVID-appropriate shot here on Arbor Day, planting native tree seedlings, which I'm pleased to report are still alive despite a dry summer last year, thanks to our loving care. And for any of you who planted trees outside of your yard, you probably realize, like I now realize, that planting the tree is the easy part. But between things like droughts, invasive competition, and deer, the question is, how does that little tree get to be 10 years old? So the more important question of did we plant 1,800 trees is how many will get to year 10? So both with an eye on water quality of establishing stream buffers, but also enhancing habitat, particularly for birds. We are moving, we're doing a lot more in this area, but are sobered by how much work it's going to involve. But it's the right work to do. So not only at Owasco Bluffs, but also on the shores of Otisco Lake, a combination of contractors and volunteers and the Onondaga Earth Corps planted a lot of native trees and shrubs there, and in partnership with the Upper Susquehanna Watershed Coalition down in the Chemung River, and more work to come. We've also looked at, as we look at restoration, think about the agricultural history in our region, eliminating a lot of the vernal pools and seasonal wetlands that once provided habitat and also slowed down runoff to the lake. So this is one of several vernal pools that we constructed in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on a property we own at the Staghorn Cliffs at Skaneateles. As I mentioned, later this year, that same partnership will be restoring wetlands at Owasco Lake, or south of Owasco at the Owasco Flats. And we also are looking at streams that have been impaired. We actually own one of them at our Van Riper Preserve. This is on the west shore of Cayuga Lake, features a beautiful stretch of shoreline, almost 2,000 feet of wooded shore. And what happened there is what happens in many places in our region is as they upgraded state highways over the years, State Route 89 really acts like a dam for runoff comes off the hills around the lake. And every once in a while they have a culvert. And where there used to be sheet flow across a broad area, there's now this concentrated runoff that this poor little stream in our preserve was overwhelmed last time they modified it. So again, in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Seneca County Soil and Water Conservation District, we secured the funding to initiate a project to restore this highly eroded stream bank of a small preserve, but really contributing significant runoff and sediment and phosphorus to the lake, and also that it won't stop till it hits bedrock. So what we're going to be doing later this year is, with a contractor and guidance from Fish and Wildlife, carefully use woody debris, logs, carefully placed stone to mimic a more natural stream design and use it as a demonstration project, because some folks would respond to this by throwing in lots and lots of rip-rap rock, which we don't think is the way to go, both from a habitat perspective and a water quality. So this is what we hope will be a demonstration project to enhance the stream, but also show a new path for all the highway departments and others working on this issue. We also upgraded existing preserves. For those of you who'd ever been to Steggy Hill in the past, we had a kind of a small parking lot that I would call an organic parking lot. I'm not sure it was ever designed. It was a logging landing at the foot of a steep hill. So it was created some traffic challenges when on popular days. And also it had a somewhat of a trudge up a steep hill. So thanks to our stewardship team, we opened a new parking area that we got support from the New York State Conservation Partnership Program, a joint state land trust alliance effort. We also involved the town of Big Flats, which is a great partner helping to create the parking area and others. And big improvement. And again, you see a brand new interpretive kiosk and other features. Dave mentioned Go Finger Lakes, and one of the priorities as we conserve these lands and restore them is to help people connect with nature. So on one hand, Go Finger Lakes has been a very big part of that, where, as you mentioned, just remarkable accomplishment on the part of our communications team to have more than 14,000 people subscribing to the e-news and getting the information. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we recognize there are folks that can't just hop in a car and get out to these places. So that's where we did those pilot grants last year to help connect inner city Rochester youth with nature. But the Rochester is outside of our service area. And we're looking within communities like Auburn and Geneva, for example, of how can we translate our mission to those underserved communities and maybe folks who can't get in a car and drive to the preserve. Very much a work in progress. So a lot of conversations going on, and we're still learning and seeing how this is going to result. But a lot of effort going on, and hope to report more at the next meeting. Now, a bit of a preview. This has been all looking back, but we anticipate an even bigger year coming up. COVID did slow down the legal community a little bit. And so the closings were, some were delayed, but we have a lot of great projects in the works. And I just want to highlight one. There's some information on our website about this. This is the Cayuga Cliffs, which is, as you can see in the upper part of this photo, you can see a road just entering the frame that was clearly, if you ever go to the site, designed to continue straight across this property for just housing. And this is a remarkable site with beautiful rugged gorges, more than 4,000 feet of shoreline on Cayuga Lake, and about 250 acres. Fortunately for us, the property is owned still for a little while longer by the Sims family that is very conservation minded, gave us a great deal. We've well on our way to our fundraising goal. And this will be a combination of a new preserve that'll be accessible to the public and a conservation easement. And just today, this is the view of the Sims property from Teganic Falls State Park. And Kelly and I were there for a kickoff event with the Lieutenant Governor of the Cayuga Lake Blueway Trail. And this is near and dear to us as well because several staff and our President's Council member and former chair, Stu Schweitzer, did about 9 years ago, I guess it was, we paddled kayaks from Ithaca to Oswego to kind of make the case that by combining conservation and recreation, it was also good for the local economy. So this was the kickoff event, and it was, as we stood there listening to all the people valuing the lake resource, the recreational resource, and the adjacent lands, we're looking directly across at this property for which we've also received some state funding support and recognize that conservation of that land really is so important, not only the water quality of the lake, but the integrity of this site that last year had 600,000 visitors. So just a great example of our work. And with that, with Kelly's assistance, I will open it up for any questions you have, because again, that was just a very quick overview. I'm happy to answer questions about any of our different projects or programs.
Well, Andy, we had two questions about the Cayuga Lake watershed. And the first one is James Hovey is wondering if we're working on any additional parcels in the Cayuga Lake watershed.
Oh, we very much so. And aside from farmland protection projects, where we've done a number of projects over the year in the vicinity of Penyan and have one in the works, both at the area around Big Gully, which is where our preserve is, but then in the vicinity of Hammondsport, we're doing a lot of outreach, and it's hard to predict how things will move forward. In Keuka, it's kind of reminds me of the Chemung River, where for about a decade, we would talk to everybody and nothing would happen. And then suddenly, about 2 or 3 years ago, we acquired, multiple parcels. We had easements. In Keuka, the conversations are going on, and we hope to have the projects to show for it soon. But it's at this time, near term, it'll be farmland protection, and we'll see what happens.
And the second question about Keuka is somebody's wondering if we work with the Finger Lakes Museum and the Isaac Walton League in Branchport.
We're working with the museum, particularly in kind of mutual support of our educational programs. And we did take a pause in terms of, aside from Zoom programs during COVID. But now that particularly we have a preserve that's literally 3-4 miles up the road from the museum, we're exploring opportunities to partner on educational programming. And I should mention, we're also working with watershed groups as well on this. So that's something. In terms of Isaac Walton League, they do own land nearby, and we have not connected with the league yet, but intend to, since we're in the same neighborhood as well.
Shifting gears just a little bit, one member is wondering if you can give us more details about what we're doing with the Seneca Nation.
Well, I broaden this not just to the Seneca Nation, where we're protecting land that we understand is sacred to the nation. So that's a very specific conversation of exploring whether there are ways we can, whether it's providing access, whether it's partnering to secure lands important to them, which involves some legal question of what is feasible under New York state law. So we're looking at very specific land issues. More broadly with the Haudenosaunee, we've been working with their environmental task force, as have some other land trusts, to say, what are mutually shared goals, and how can we work together that might involve everything from protecting land to access to land for traditional purposes, such as, there could be wild foodstuffs or something like that, or just for use in other ways. But then also we have modest educational programs, but possibly also helping accurately tell the story as they see it. So all of those are on the table, and we're really learning right now. And it's an exploration, as is some of the conversations in places like Auburn or Geneva, of how can we better serve some folks who maybe are not, are underserved and relevant in relation to our programs.
Another kind of big picture question is, with all the new and crucial easements, how big is the pressure on the land trust to increase staff surveillance and adherence to easement provisions?
Well, that's why this year, despite the pandemic, you saw the addition of a full-time land steward, and that growth will need to continue. Fortunately, you all have supported us, so we were able to do that and operate in the black. But clearly, both as our responsibilities increase, but then as the world gets more crowded, and not, in terms of big city crowded, but what you see in the countryside is that the 100-acre property, once had one farmer neighbor, and that was one relationship to manage. And suddenly it's maybe, I don't know, just say 5 20-acre lots. Well, that's 5 new families. And over time, I think the risks of a misunderstanding or a neighbor encroachment or things like that just increase. So in the long run, that's why we're committed to growing our stewardship fund, that we can support the staffing we need to accommodate the public. Most people are very respective, but we do get cases of vandalism and erosion issues and so on our preserves. And then the proactive engagement of our easement landowners as that land passes from the original donor or seller of the easement who fully understood it to that person who fell in love with the beautiful colonial and said, what's an easement? And then said, I'm going to close anyway. Well, we have to work with that person regardless. So stewardship is the big issue of the future, and we're going to be doing cost modeling and using our best thinking to kind of set new goals for what we should be shooting for in terms of capacity.
Speaking of stewardship, there's a question about if there's any special care needed for the many trees planted at the south end of Atisco Lake to ensure their survival.
Well, first is competing vegetation that we have to, cut that back, and we'll be doing so this summer. Just did it at Owasco, because otherwise the seedlings just don't grow as quickly as other vegetation. It can be smothered. At the same time, what's good about the site at Otisco, it's kind of a bottomland site and it's moist. So I think hopefully that is not a case where we're planning to water the seedlings, because that is the other big issue in survival. And then the last is the deer. So a lot of them are in cages or tubes, and that's a little extra expense, but it's necessary in most of these plantings because otherwise the seedlings won't make it. And that's an issue I should mention region-wide. We are looking at the deer overpopulation issue and its effect on forests, where we're not seeing the regeneration we should. So on one hand, we're doing more on our lands. We do have a hunting program, but looking at, is it having an effect on population? And recognizing too that these issues go beyond the property. So as we engage the State Department of Environmental Conservation, we're getting involved more on conversations of issues of invasive species and deer populations, that no matter how hard you try on one population, on one property, it's the wrong scale really to address those problems.
Great, that's all of the questions I see in the chat, unless, oh, wait, one more, sorry. Will you be talking about gypsy moths, which is my favorite topic?
Yes. Kelly has a particular affinity for killing gypsy moths. But gypsy moths, I can tell you that I can remember probably 20 years ago, like some of you, the last really bad outbreak that we had, at least in the southern tier. So at least the good news based on history is barring a severe drought coinciding with the infestation, the majority of our trees will survive. But I know there's a lot of concern, and we are, like other folks, consulting with experts on best practices. But it's happening as we speak, and it's year 2 in the Western Finger Lakes. I feel like it's the first year in the Eastern. So hopefully next year, usually it's a 2 to 3 year peak infestation before the population crashes. So we are concerned, but for the most part, we're monitoring and hoping that this event is like the past, where some trees are stressed and die, but the majority revegetate.
John Fitzpatrick, who's executive director of the Lab of Ornithology, for those who don't already know him, is pointing out in the chat that it is particularly good for some species of birds. So what's not so good for the trees and me is really good for some birds. All right. Well, I think unless somebody has a last minute question, that's it for the questions. I don't, Andy, if you have any last minute things to say, and then we do have a quick video that we're going to try to run and see if it works.
Just to mention that we're delighted that we're not masked, and we are getting back to field trips and programs. And you can look at our newsletter, but also would encourage getting on our e-news or check our website, because some events don't as neatly fit the newsletter production schedule. But look for more outings. We look forward to seeing you on the preserves and having some guided field trips and events. So we look forward to seeing you out there. And thanks again for getting us through this year, not just getting us through, but allowing us really to thrive, and with even bigger things to come this year.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and play a video. And for those of you who have a really good internet connection, this should run smoothly. But if it doesn't, I'll also send the link out tomorrow to everybody who is registered. And so then you can watch the movie on your own time if it doesn't work perfectly for you right now. It's just a short video put together by Jeff Catras, who's a consultant with us, and a lot of footage from our volunteers.
Wow.
So hopefully you are all able to see that. And if not, or you want to watch it again, or you want to share it with people, I will send the link around to everybody tomorrow. But as you can see, the numbers speak for themselves. And with your great support, we really are making a difference.
Terrific. Well, on behalf of the board and staff, let me extend my sincere appreciation to the support that all of you are giving us, and please continue to do so in the future.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everybody. Keep in touch.